Hi everyone, I'm Wendy, and today I'll be sharing 3 different whole food plant-based granola bar recipes. I'll be using the basic granola bar recipe that I shared in a previous video as the base. Then, by switching up a few ingredients, we'll come up with 3 completely different flavors. We'll start with chocolate cherry, followed by pumpkin spice, and finally a PB&J inspired granola bar. First up, chocolate cherry granola bars. Just like with our basic granola bar recipe, we'll start by soaking 2 cups of pitted dates in 1 1/4 cup of water. Then we'll add 4 cups of old-fashioned rolled oats to a large mixing bowl. Next is a teaspoon of vanilla bean powder, followed by a 1/4 cup of carob powder. I use carob to give this a chocolatey flavor without the caffeine. Feel free to use cocoa powder instead, but keep in mind that cocoa powder is slightly more bitter and carob powder is slightly sweeter. So using cocoa powder will result in a slightly less sweet granola bar. But we have plenty of dates in here to sweeten it up, so you should be just fine. I like to mix the oats to make sure the carob powder is fully incorporated. Then it's time to add the cherries. I'm using a cup of chopped dried Bing cherries. You can use whatever kind of dried cherries or another dried fruit if you prefer. But whatever you choose, I like to try and make sure to use dried fruit that doesn't have any added oils or sugars. The one that I have today is just made with dried cherries. Then I'm going to mix this around as well, once again to make sure the cherries are spread out evenly. Next up, I'll transfer the dates along with the soaking water to a high-speed blender, or you could use a food processor instead. To this, I'm also adding about a tablespoon of tahini. Like I mentioned in my first granola bar video, this is completely optional. If you leave it out, the granola bars will still be delicious. This just adds a little bit of a richer, nutty flavor. Feel free to use any kind of nut or seed butter that you like. And also feel free to play around with the proportions. If you want to increase the fat content, you can add more nut butter and reduce the amount of dates. If reducing the number of dates, you might need to adjust the amount of water. But you can play around with these to make it your own. Once the date paste is blended, add it to the bowl with the oats and cherries and stir until everything is mixed really well. Then I'm transferring the mixture to an 8 by 12 inch casserole dish. You can use whatever shape and size of pans that you like to get the thickness of granola bar you prefer. You could even use a muffin pan if you wanted. I do recommend lining the pan with parchment to make it easier to remove and clean up, but it will still work even without the parchment. Press the mixture firmly until it's packed down well and the top is relatively even. I think this is easiest if you use your hands, but you could also use a spatula if you prefer. And you can eat these now, but at this point they are pretty sticky. So I put them in the oven at 250 degrees Fahrenheit for about an hour, or until they're no longer sticky on top. I like to do this at a pretty low temperature, so it's more like a cross between dehydrating and baking. This ensures they dry out evenly without getting too dry on the outside. Once they're out of the oven, let them cool and then cut them into granola bar shapes. I eat this recipe just like this, but I'm saving half of this batch for my sister who is a chocoholic. So on her half, I'm adding a chocolate drizzle. In my first granola bar video, I showed you the option of putting the chocolate chips on before putting these in the oven. Then you simply spread an even layer of chocolate over the top. But this time, I took about a 1/4 cup of vegan chocolate chips and melted them in a glass measuring cup in the microwave. It's easy to burn chocolate quickly this way, so you'll only want to microwave these for about 30 seconds and then stir until the chocolate is fully melted. Then simply drizzle the chocolate over the granola bars. Put these in the fridge to help firm up the chocolate, and then they are ready to go. Next up, we have pumpkin pie granola bars. These are a lot less sweet because this time I'm starting with only 1 cup of pitted dates. The rest of the volume will come from pumpkin this time, but I'll give you some options later if you want to make these sweeter. For now, I added just 3/4 of a cup of water to soak the dates. Then to the mixing bowl, I'm adding 4 cups of old-fashioned rolled oats. As before, I'm also adding a teaspoon of vanilla bean powder. But this time, I'm also adding 2 heaping teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice. Next is a 1/2 cup of chopped pecans, or for a low-fat version, you can add an additional 1/2 cup of rolled oats instead of the pecans. Keep in mind this will be divided out between 16 to 20 granola bars, so you're only getting a small amount with each serving. As before, I'm stirring the oat mixture before adding the wet ingredients to make sure all the spices are well incorporated. Then I'm adding the dates and the soaking water to my high-speed blender, along with a 15-ounce can of pumpkin puree. Make sure you just get the plain pumpkin puree and not pumpkin pie filling. As I mentioned, this recipe is not as sweet as the others, since we're replacing half the amount of dates with pumpkin. If you're used to a no added sugar diet, the subtle sweetness might be enough for you. But if you like it a little sweeter, I'd recommend adding a couple teaspoons of maple syrup or date syrup. You could also use more dates and less pumpkin, but then you lose a little bit of the pumpkin flavor and you're stuck with part of a can of pumpkin to use. So the easiest way to add a little more sweetness without affecting the total volume of this recipe is just to add a little liquid sweetener. As before, we're blending until the dates are pulverized, but because of the pumpkin, this mixture is a little thicker and you might need to use the tamper. Again, a food processor would also be great. You might just need to scrape down the sides a couple of times. Once it's blended, add the mixture to the bowl with the oats and stir until well combined. As before, you'll press this mixture into your parchment-lined pan and bake at 250 degrees Fahrenheit for about an hour. Once these are cool and you cut them into granola bar shapes, they're ready to serve. Finally, let's move on to probably my favorite of these three, the peanut butter and jelly inspired granola bars. Again, I'm starting with 1 cup of pitted dates, but this time I'm also adding a cup of raisins. The raisins will be the jelly flavor for our PB&J. And just as a side note, while I normally say get whatever you can afford, I do try to get organic raisins when I can, because grapes are on the dirty dozen list of fruits and veggies with the most pesticide residue. It's also recommended to rinse dates, raisins, and other dried fruit because there are many steps where they're handled during packaging and processing of the dried fruit, so rinsing them helps to remove possible dust, dirt, bacteria, and other contaminants that may have accumulated. So I rinsed these and I'm adding them to the bowl along with 1 1/4 cups of water. Again, we'll set that aside to soak while we prepare the dry ingredients. This time I'm adding 3 1/2 cups of old-fashioned rolled oats to the mixing bowl. Once again, I'm adding a teaspoon of vanilla bean powder because I love that vanilla flavor so much. Feel free to leave it out if you prefer. I'll stir that to evenly distribute it. After the dates and raisins have soaked for a few minutes, I'm again adding that to my high-speed blender or food processor. This time, I'm also adding 1 cup of dry roasted peanuts. I'm oil-free and I try to avoid sodium, so these are unsalted and dry roasted peanuts. Adding the peanuts does make this recipe a bit higher in fat than the others. If you try to keep the fat content of your diet low like I do, just be mindful when eating these that you don't overindulge. But also, this divides out to less than a tablespoon of peanuts per granola bar. As before, blend this up and add the mixture into the bowl with the rolled oats. I have to say, just blending this all together smells absolutely delicious. It really smells like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And by now, you know the drill. Once this is well mixed, you'll press it into your pan and put it in the oven at 250 degrees until no longer sticky to the touch. I find that 1 hour is usually good. Once these are cooled and cut, they're ready to enjoy. Again, I like these as is, but if you want, you can always add that little drizzle of chocolate like I showed before. I hope these recipes have given you some ideas and maybe you'll come up with some great flavors on your own. As always, feel free to share your ideas in the comments below, as well as what you might like to see me make in a future video. Thanks for watching, liking, and subscribing, and I hope to see you next time.